8 years earlier, Kraske was a lieutenant with the sheriff's department. In the summer of '74, beautiful, intelligent women were vanishing near local college campuses. Their disappearances sent shockwaves of terror throughout Seattle and ultimately the world. There were few witnesses and little physical evidence. The killer was like a mysterious phantom. Until one hot July day, when a handsome man dressed in white approached some young women at Lake Sammamish and asked for help with his sailboat.
Yeah, if you don't mind, it'll just take a minute.
Sure, yeah, no worries.
2 women disappeared that same day.
Hey, I'm Ted. It's just...
Bystanders heard the killer introduce himself to one beachgoer. He said his name was Ted. After murdering at least 8 women in Washington, Ted Bundy, a bright law student with a promising career, fled the state. He left a trail of victims in Utah, Colorado, and Idaho.
I want to see your hands right now.
Ultimately, he was caught and convicted for murders in Florida. In the end, Bundy confessed to killing 30 women over 4 years. Nearly every month he was on the loose, another life was lost. And now, for Washington investigators like Richard Kraske, a sense of failure still haunts them.
And I have seen the Bundy files. They were a mess. I would never have recommended doing anything that way, but that was the way it was done in 1974. They didn't have the luxury of a computer. They had card systems and paper ticklers and whatever they call that stuff, but it was backwoods.
Investigators realize the Green River killer case will be even more challenging than the Ted murders.
The Ted Bundy murder victims were young, maybe between high school and college. They were taken from parks, etc. Whereas the Green River victims, they were working in the shadows. So there was completely different victimology, especially when it came down to tracking where they had been.
Most witnesses will be other prostitutes and pimps, and they don't trust the police. They're less likely to come forward with critical information.
There are a lot of problems you can have when you're investigating a serial murder case that involves prostitutes. First off, the encounter with the killer is going to be the only time that they ever met. He's not going to be a person that's in their background, so it's not like working a regular homicide case where you're looking for somebody that knows the victim. Secondly, there is a communication gap, I guess you'd call it, between the police and the prostitutes as a rule. But the biggest problem was finding somebody that could report somebody missing if they did go missing.
And unlike college students, these victims themselves engage in extremely high-risk behavior. They never know which trick might be their last.
The prostitutes think that they're smart and that they can tell a sick trick from a normal John, that they have a sixth sense or a gut reaction. But the problem with the Green River Killers victims is that many of them are very, very young and they haven't learned how to tell a sick trick.
They think they can spot the creeps and the weirdos. Usually they have no idea. Weirdos don't walk around dragging their knuckles and drooling. It's usually a very normal-looking guy.
With 25 officers, the King County Sheriff's Department forms the Green River Killer Task Force. They reach out to the FBI for support.
Typically with murder, you look at who has the motive, who has the means, and who has the opportunity. And you've got your suspect pool there.
Please let me go.
But when murder itself is the motive, it could be anyone. It's really, really difficult to catch these guys unless you catch them in the act. So at this point, something called profiling is invented. And one of the top minds in profiling is a guy named John Douglas.
Douglas believes the killer's psychological signature is revealed in his choice of victims and the crime scenes.
And when he hears about the Green River case, he's very intrigued. This guy has talked to Charles Manson. He's talked to Ed Kemper, and now he wants to help hunt the Green River Killer.
Douglas thinks that unlike Ted Bundy, the killer is not the kind of guy who can approach women in bars. He's shy and may have sought these prostitutes for sex. The killer may also resent the power women have over him, including prostitutes.
The Green River Killer is paying for sex. However, once he kills the prostitute, he takes the money back. He's aware that these women are only having sex with him for the money, and he really resents that. He resents that he does have to pay for it. He resents that they fake their enjoyment. It's just a job for them. He's just another John.
What prompted the murders? Douglas speculates the killer has failed at a recent relationship and feels humiliated. The killer sees women as whores. By targeting prostitutes, the killer may believe he's doing the community a service.
The FBI profile states that the killer is both organized and disorganized. Killer is organized because he hides the body or he distorts the crime scene so that it's not recognizable as such, or he removes the body so that wherever the body is found is not the scene where the murder actually occurred. However, he's also disorganized because it looks like, according to the FBI profile, that he's not planning to murder the victims, that something sets him off, and he does the murder in a rage.
Also, the killer likely lives in his fantasies, where he dominates and humiliates women by exerting his power over them. Because he lives in his own fantasy world, he may be underemployed, even unemployed.
Whereas Ted Bundy never stopped killing anyone, he just moved to a different jurisdiction when the police began closing in on him. The Green River Killer stayed in his area, but he was smart enough to not leave any evidence, or so he thought, and to kind of disappear, to appear normal, or as normal as anyone could be to escape detection for that long. And he was very good at covering his tracks.
Based on the crime scenes, FBI profiler John Douglas believes the killer's comfortable with the outdoors. He may be a fisherman or hunter. He may be fascinated by police work. He could even be posing as a cop.
We are socialized to obey authority figures, and some serial killers masquerade as law enforcement officers because that allows them to get close to a target. The target sees a police officer, they think that that police officer is someone that they can trust, so they drop their guard. And then by the time they realize that this person is not a real law enforcement officer, it's too late for them to do anything, to escape.
Finally, Douglas thinks the killer is following the case in local news. He might try to insert himself into the investigation.
Another tactic that serial killers use is to present themselves as a witness, is someone who can become involved in the investigation. They can contact the police, they can give false information, kind of throw the police off of their scent and misdirect them to someone else.
Then, detectives begin receiving suspicious calls from a man who says they should be looking at taxi drivers.
So there's a couple of calls that come in that are very suspicious. The first one is a guy saying, "Hey, why haven't you guys looked at cab drivers yet?" and hangs up. And he calls back again and says, "I really can't believe that you're not looking at cab drivers." Hangs up again. Ultimately, this guy contacts him one more time. Guess what? He's a cab driver.
Tom Jensen was a detective on the Green River case.
It's not unusual in a serial murder case that the killer wants to know what's going on, so offers his help and offers to be part of the investigation. And that's what came up right away.
Investigators realize that it's the man making the calls who warrants a closer look. His name is Melvin Foster.
He does seem